Hi, everyone. We're so excited we're finally together back to talk with all of you. It's been a minute.
I know. But eventually, we're going to do the in-person together at the same time too. But
This
we'll
is
get
a
there.
step closer for
We'll get
sure.
there.
We're a step closer.
Yes.
Well, it's great to be back with all of you. And today we are going to talk about, I think, something that many of us struggle with during the summer. And in fact, I was just even thinking about this morning, and that's routines.
Yeah.
That we do a pretty good job when life is consistent.
Yes.
But sometimes in summer when life goes a little haywire, it's really easy for us to fall off our routines. And I know that's personally when I start to not feel very well, when I start to not handle my stress well, all of those things. And so we thought it would be a great topic to just unpack and review kind of what the science tells us and how we maybe need to modify our routines to be a little more flexible. Day-to-day life is not as consistent, but yet still be able to have a routine because we know that for a lot of us that's sanity.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I feel like we've both been living in this phase of so many kind of curveballs and pace and important milestones. And so we're big fans of, everybody should cut themselves a break when they hit a really differential season or it's a super important milestone. But sometimes if that break turns into a phase, then you lose the peace of mind and the cadence and the resilience and the
Yeah.
energy that comes
Yeah.
from routine or holding space for a routine, not being rigid, but like holding space and
Right.
honoring a routine.
Right. And I think even for me, and I know we're going to dive into this more, but even the connections sometimes those routines have, the social components are sometimes what I don't realize are lacking until I get back in these routines and start seeing
Yeah,
people that maybe I only connect with at the gym or at a fitness class or when I stop and get my coffee here at that time of day, et cetera. And it's sometimes easy to take those casual connections for granted, but they're really important to our overall health
they are.
and to
They
have
are.
that social conscience. So,
Yeah, they're fuel. They're definitely fuel.
absolutely. Absolutely.
Well, because when you and I were talking about this, we were like, first of all, we got to be together over the holiday weekend, which was such
We
an
did.
uplift. But we were thinking about what was happening in our lives, and we would kind of think about routines around why is it supportive of your mindset and your mental health, which is what is the
Hmm.
fuel for the stuff we go out and do, and then why do routines support your physical fitness? Some of that's a little more like, oh, that's obvious, it's working out or that's sleep, but some of it's a little more nuanced. So we thought maybe we could just remind ourselves of the science because we're both always like, we need the rationale on why it's worth our time, why it's worth our
Hmm.
energy, so we can kind of just fly through some of those science-based rationale points. And we
Hmm.
then get into the practical and tactical of like, how do you bring a routine back without it feeling like a heavy lift or like a
Right.
pain cost?
Right. Right. So, I love this first point about decision fatigue. And I think this is real, right? And it's the reason we have routines in so many areas of life, even in sometimes when we are doing really important things, right? We have a checklist and we have a
Yep.
checklist because we do it the same every time and there's no surprises, et cetera. But it also takes that decision fatigue out. And this is really important because it frees our brains to be able to use that energy in other places.
Yeah. Yeah. And we always hear about the people who wear the same thing every day or eat the same foods every day, which could be boring. But the idea of taking, I think that what was the stat? It's like something like 3,000 decisions we make in a day,
Yeah.
taking the ones that are not enjoyable or are super high impact out of the mix is a way to get energy back.
And I think what's interesting about that is even little things then become greater. Like for example, Monday through Friday, the coffee pot goes off at 5:30 in the morning and I don't have to think about it. And all of a sudden that's not happening. And now I'm like, oh, that's one more thing on the to-do list. I have to get up and like reset the coffee pot because it's at a different time every day. And so it's really
Yes.
interesting how something super small can actually lead to like even just getting your day started in a
Yes.
more mishmash way if you're not out of your routine.
Yes. So it kind of it supports decision fatigue and it eliminates that distraction and that energy suck. There is something also about the predictability. So in our subconscious mind, if we're not sure what's coming, even if you're a vicarious, spontaneous energy source person, there is something in your subconscious that attaches to the idea of predictability. And I know what's coming, and so I'm not questioning in the background what I need to be thinking about or worrying about. So that's part of that decision fatigue rationale, but thinking about it in terms of how can I help my inner vibrations quiet down a little bit because there is something I know to be true. I'm going to do this every day at this certain time.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I really like the idea too of this kind of mood stabilizing component of routines. And again, I think it's really interesting that I think some of this is, if we have some underlying anxiety, if we have some other things, doing things consistently can help with that, right? It's predictable.
Yes.
We know what's going to happen. But I also think there is the social component of that too. It's like when we are in these routines, we tend to interact with similar people and develop relationships. And when we're out of those routines, that part can fall away. And so we might have a little more isolation when we're out of those routines than what we had expected.
Yeah, for sure. It's also when people's schedule cadence is out of whack, so it's not the natural way to reconnect, that you got
Hmm.
to sort of help that routine enforce that social connection. I think that the other thing that is, I feel it when I'm in a good rhythm and cadence is this sense of I have, a sense of, I don't want to say control, but like predictability equals I know there's some self-efficacy. I know that I'm driving my own agenda that day versus being ping ponged from everybody's requests who need something.
Hmm.
Everybody always is going to have a request and need something. But if you're in this routine,
Hmm.
it's like this is what I'm doing, and I'm actually the one driving the day's rhythm and pace instead of being
Hmm.
in this responsive mode.
Yeah, for sure. And I think it helps us maintain a sense, at least when I'm in my routine, the ability to prioritize what I need is a little bit easier, right? It's like I try to do things in my day, my self care at times where it has the least amount of impact on those around me, right? Like you and I are both very early morning exercisers. And part of that is I know I can get it done. I know that I'm not interrupting the kids, like they're doing their thing,
Totally.
husband's getting off to work. Like I just know that I can have that 45 minutes or an hour early in the morning and I'm not interrupted by work yet, like all of those things. But sometimes when we get off those routines, that ability to care for ourselves goes away because all of a sudden, gosh, I might enjoy sleeping in these days and that's great. And we're not saying don't sleep in every once in a while, but I often find if I'm not out of bed first thing in the morning to get that done, that window is gone for the
Yes.
rest of the day. And then it just kind of all of those dominoes happen. Okay, well, I didn't work out today. And now maybe I'm not making as good of food choices because I'm out of my routine of when I, come home from working out and this is what I'm going to eat. And then even to the point where when I get ready for bed at the end of the day, I just don't feel like I've kind of done all the boxes and I have this little bit of lingering anxiety because these things didn't get done.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. It's like that subtle like noise in the back of your mind that just, it didn't
Hmm.
happen. So you kind of go to sleep with it. So that's a lot of the mental reasons. And you mentioned mood and kind of helping you regulate mood by getting into your routines. And then there's the kind of block and tackle physical health components
Hmm.
that are supported by routine. So you have been sort of our shining light on this, the idea of this, if you have to get back to something quickly, it's the sleep and wake routines, right?
Absolutely. And this is always hard too, summertime when people are traveling, et cetera. But, this is where consistency is key. And I think this is, whether we're talking about sleep or even when we get to movement and fueling, as consistent as possible is probably the best we can do. And so it's like, it may not be perfect, but we're never perfect. And so, really, when you have the time, when you have the ability to keep as consistent a sleep wake cycle as you can, that is key to like every other piece falling into place. And
Yes.
so I think that, that is one thing that it might be worth, oh, I don't have anything on the schedule today, blah, blah, blah. Maybe I'll just stay in bed a couple extra hours. It's probably worth getting up. You may not
Yeah.
get up and jump into your day the way you usually do, but it just for your body to stay in that consistent cycle. And if you're traveling, to try to get into as consistent a cycle in your new location as
Yeah.
possible, or determine if it's worth it. I right now have a lot of 2-day trips, and I really try to stay on my home sleep wake cycle instead of trying to adjust to a new time zone for 48 hours.
Yeah. That's so smart. And it takes a little bit of preemptive planning to do it, but it's like I'm gonna stay on this routine.
Yeah, absolutely. And then, it's the same thing with food, right? It's like our bodies are usually pretty regimented and our brains and our bodies start to predict when fuel is going to come. And so if we get way off on that, it can, cause us to feel fatigued. It can cause some GI issues. It can impact our sleep, right? If all of a sudden we're eating dinner an hour before we're trying to go to bed, all of these things. So I think as much as we can stay consistent in these two areas, it really does keep our like subconscious quality of life higher.
Yeah.
We don't feel as anxious, we don't feel as overwhelmed, we feel like we're being well rested, we feel like, we have some control and some agency, which oftentimes I know I feel like I just completely lose in the summer.
Yeah. Well, I mean, and there's also the real component of your metabolism needs to expect food at a certain window, right? So if
Mhm.
you're erratic, your body's like, I don't know what to do with this energy source. Should I hold on to it? Should I burn it?
Right.
What am I doing? So you need to kind of have that consistent eating window so that your body knows food's coming. I don't need to have a bunch of a cortisol reaction and stress here. And
Mhm.
it's a constant, at least as
Yeah.
whatever it is, that you're trying that rhythm, just have it be a constant rhythm if you can.
Right. And I think, I mean, the same goes for movement. Like when we're at home, I know we both try to prioritize moving in similar schedules to when kind of during the school year and when things are more routine.
Yeah.
But I think even traveling, if you are a person that gets up and exercises in the morning, even if you can get up and go for a walk, or it may not be the same intensity, may not be the same activity, which is great. I mean, it's also a great time to let your body reset, maybe try something different.
Yes.
But if you can still get out and do some sort of movement in the same time periods that you're used to moving, again, that just helps all of the things. It helps our circadian rhythms, it helps with meal timing, it helps with all of those pieces, even if it's a different activity.
Yeah. And we've talked about this on over the weekend we were together, but we've each navigated kids with injuries. And so right now it's like helping our kids understand that you don't have to do the same kind of workout or the same kind of practice to let your brain know that you're still in the same rhythm, right? So I
Right.
think it's that Jerry Seinfeld anecdote that we've talked about before, where he always writes a joke a day. He just is like, I'll never break the streak. It could be a terrible joke. It doesn't have to be a good joke, but I try to keep that going. And I think that's the same thing as you're describing it for our workouts. It's like it doesn't have to be the best, most intensive workout ever when you're feeling low or you're jet lagged or you only have 10 minutes. It's the
Hmm.
idea that you always do the movement and you always hold that rhythm so that your
Absolutely.
body knows that's part of what we do. So getting back into that doesn't have to be the most extreme version of your workout to
Right.
keep yourself in a daily rhythm.
And I also think if you are recently established a new habit, like those are sometimes the easiest to fall out of. And so I think this is really important. Like, you know, some habits are easier for us to develop and be consistent with, and some habits are really more difficult. We each have our strengths and weaknesses in these areas. But if you've recently developed a new habit that really took a lot of time and energy to create and sustain, protect that.
Yeah.
So, it's like you may not be able to protect everything, but protect those critical things that you've worked really hard to incorporate into your lifestyle and that you're really, you're proud of and you're really celebrating. Protect those first.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think, that's always a good data point that we reference is that they think there's been a ton of research on habit, et cetera, but it kind of lands around 60 to 70 days to
Hmm.
make a habit become automatic. So if you prioritize in that window, just doing whatever version you can do versus being overwhelmed by the fact that you didn't do the best version that you thought of, that gets you
Right.
the consistency lever.
Okay. So let's talk about and take us through this. Everything's just fallen apart. Like routine is gone, routine has been blown up, and hopefully because we're doing fun stuff, et cetera. But maybe it's just life, and you and I have had a lot of life thrown at us lately. So,
Yeah.
so habits are just blown up.
Yeah.
How do we start to get back on track?
Well, okay, so first, I mean, you just touched on it. First is like give yourself some grace. It's like it's this season, or if it's the summer, it's like, hey, there's daylight that's changing our circadian rhythms, there's vacation, there's heat, whatever the thing that's been around the catalyst to change your rhythm, just give yourself some cadence and grace for changing that cadence, and then get into how do I get back into the routine. So start with some grace. But I think, your anchor around sleep first is the most leveraged habit to pull. So can you get back into the right bedtime and the right wake up time for you? And it doesn't
Hmm.
have to be what you do in the wintertime or the school year, but just get into a consistency around sleep, the sleep time and the wake up time, so that you can get that circadian rhythm and that sleep rhythm back in track.
Yeah. What about using data in this phase? Like you and I talk about this all the time,
Yeah.
like the pros and the cons, and when do we use it and when do we not? And I think, it's interesting. I am personally struggling with this idea of optimization leading to fragility, right? That
Yeah. Yeah.
if our data is not telling us all the time that we're optimized, we subconsciously think we can't go do hard things. Right. And it's like that equation doesn't always work for most of us. That most of the time we don't get a lot of control over when we have to go do hard things. But I think this is an interesting idea. And I'd love just to hear your approach to this of how do we use our data to create positive change when a routine has been disrupted, when we know it may not show what we want it to show, it may not reflect where we were a month ago before our routine got disrupted. But how can we engage with our data in a way to really help us navigate this versus being a source of disappointment?
Right, right. And so I think, as you described it, it's like you got to be kind of honest about how you are wired, right? So data can do two things. It can be a motivator or it can be a learning indicator, but, on the positive front. So if you're motivated by the data, you're like, I want to hit these numbers, I want to do this, then look at it every day. So when I was in this phase, when I was trying to do a lot of body comp work, it helped me to look at the data every day because I was doing a lot of effort around the
Hmm.
idea of body comp. And so I wanted to check all those incoming metrics around that outcome. And it was motivating. But if you're not learning anything from the data, if it's just like, yeah, I know I'm traveling. Yeah, I know I'm
Hmm.
with my family eating late at night. Then it's more of it's a eroder of energy. So I would say
Hmm.
on the first lever, use the data if it's motivating. If it's like, hey, I want to hit these numbers, that's motivating. Secondly, use the data, and you and I have had so many examples of this where it's helpful if you're changing part of your routine. If you're actually reevaluating, do I want this to be part of my routine or I want this input? Then use the data there because it's like, all right, I changed this routine. Did it help? Did it not? Whatever. But
Hmm.
if you're using the data in a way and you feel like a penalty cost every time you look at it, I'm not sure that's really helping fuel your energy or your forward progress. Still do the activities that you know rationally are high impact activities and maybe decouple from trying to check the data every hour,
Yeah.
every day, if it's a distraction from your momentum.
Yeah. No, I think that's so important for us to understand and to have that messaging reinforced. And I also think that sometimes if we've been out of our routine for a month, we have to establish a new baseline. Like, we can't like we're not going to be at the same place as where we left off most of the time. I think that consistency is key. And if we've lost that consistency for a little while, we probably need to establish a new baseline and go from there. And that doesn't mean that like the world is ending. It just means, okay, I also think that then helps interpret metrics a little bit differently. Like if I was really dialed on my sleep and I traveled for a month, or I have kids coming and going at different hours. And so my sleep is disrupted all the time. Well, guess what? Some of my sleep data is not going to be where it was when I was super consistent. And that's okay. Let me just start fresh with this new set of metrics and not hold myself to a standard that may not be currently attainable.
Yeah.
And that
Yeah.
doesn't mean we can't use the data, like you said, as a motivator, as a guide, but that doesn't mean the data is going to be the same as what it was.
Absolutely. And so, I love that expression we've used a few times, which is set the bar low and clear it. It's like,
Yeah. And celebrate.
just get out there. Like one of the things in my routine that got way off track in the last 3 months was taking just the basic supplements. Like,
Yeah.
we talk about magnesium,
Hmm.
creatine. For me, if I don't take magnesium, I wake up with leg cramps. Like I get immediate feedback it's not working. Like, I'm not going to try to take every single possible supplement I can take that I know it was okay to take and good. I'm just going to take my magnesium and my creatine. That's a low bar. I can do that. Right. And then I can throw in the fiber and then maybe I'll get the algae cow. It's like, it doesn't have to go back to my full executed routine in order to be progress. Because this is a long game. It's marathon life we're living. We can't be running at sprints the entire life or even at hit interval training our entire life. Right. It's just, this is a marathon. Just stay in the race.
I also think, when we're out of routine, sometimes we actually pick up things that we want to incorporate into our routine. So, we were traveling as a family, and for like a week, we went for a walk after dinner.
Yeah, I love
And like, and that's a habit that like we really do try to do most of the time, but it's probably one of the easiest that falls off the list. That, it gets dark, it gets cold, we're doing the dishes, people have stuff to do. And so while it's so well intentioned, it often falls off the list, especially come winter when it's not so nice to be outside in the evening, et cetera. And so, sometimes we can reestablish some things when we actually can take a deep breath and have a little more time, that then we can say, okay, this is something I really do want to start to reincorporate into my routine. I know it's really good for me. I know it's a time to kind of get off a screen and reconnect and wind down from the day, and kind of all of those things that are really good that we sometimes forget to do. And sometimes when we have a minute to slow down, we can embrace some of these things and refigure out, that's not very good English,
yeah,
sorry about that.
yeah, it is. Yeah, yeah,
Like to just figure out how to reinsert some of these things into our routines.
yeah, yeah. I think that that's a great reminder. And then it's always the giving yourself whatever, is the right cadence for you. Maybe it's 2 weeks or 3 weeks. Like, don't judge the new habit on day one. It's like, I'm going to try this thing. Like we talk about our prototyping habit. Like, I'm going to
Right.
try this thing for X amount of time. And it's got to be maybe not 60 days, 70 days, but it's got to be at least 2 or 3 weeks to then evaluate, do I want to continue investing in this part of my habit routine?
Right. Right. Absolutely. So, okay. So we know why habits and routines are important. We've talked a little bit about which routines and habits we want to prioritize if we've gotten out of there. So, especially sleep.
Hmm.
And I think fueling comes in being important about, our bodies are pretty simple at times. It's like they're
Yeah.
expecting things on a certain cadence. And so making sure that we are as as much as we can doing those things. But then also, okay, what can we how do we restart? And once we restart, how do we remeasure?
Yeah, yeah, and so, as you were kind of going through those different habits, it's back to the fundamentals. It's like, okay, get back on your sleep routine, and then your movement routine, and then your nutrition and hydration routine. Like you can stack
Hmm.
how you get back into those different routines. And I think, your call out early on about how fueling and how much of a big ripple effect the social routine can be. And I think in some ways, at least for me in the last few months, that's the hardest part of my routine, or the hardest part of my time to energize for,
Hmm.
because
Hmm.
tired. Like the stuff I'm dealing with in my day-to-day life right now, I find exhausting, and so I'm tired. But I know, like this morning, I got to go on a hike with one of my dear friends, and I felt so much better, even though I'm exhausted going into it. So you just remind yourself that that's an important part of our life, is being heart to heart connected.
Yeah. And I think we had a great demonstration of this weekend. Like we did an activity that we normally do, and then we normally go back to our house and like hibernate. And you said come over. And I was like, "Okay." And we had so much fun. And it wasn't, it was just sitting in a chair on your front porch and connecting with people. And I think that, when we're out of our routines, even when we're in our routines, like that's a piece that sometimes we actually have to make kind of a double down commitment to doing is I know I'm tired. It's so easy to just go home and kind of insulate ourselves. And yet that almost depletes our energy more, right? That it's getting out, whether you're outside or not, but just getting out and connecting with others is really a really low cost to no cost way to fill our tanks. And I think that, both my husband and I were laughing. We're like, we were more social this weekend than we've been in months. I mean, we're not even usually in the same state on the weekends. And how fun it was, and how energized we were, and how nice it was to just be able to catch up with people. And so I think that, when you're out of your routine, maybe there's an opportunity to do that a little bit more. Or maybe it's a really great, like if you're traveling or meeting family or friends to do certain vacations this summer, maybe it's a really good time to take that moment that we talk about with gratitude or journaling or all of those things to remind yourself how you feel when you get these opportunities to connect with people you really care about, and use that as motivation to try to continue that practice even when it seems like there's no time for it.
Yeah, yeah, I love that. Yeah, maybe you can start there even before sleep, because I love that. Yeah, so it's just, this is just an invitation for us to start thinking about routines again, not to feel regimented, not to be like super disciplined, just to say there's actually some energy and some relief you might get when you're ready to reintroduce the routine. Everyone takes a break. Everyone has a chance to kind of be like, this is not my moment for my routine. And then when you're ready to get back into it, this is the science and the reminder about why it might be worth starting the
Yeah.
flywheel. And it
Yeah.
goes.
And I like, yeah, absolutely. And I think it's okay. Like maybe you have, you put this in our notes, like maybe you have a summer routine. And so it's okay if your routine doesn't look exactly like your winter routine or your school year routine or your work week routine. But that's okay. But just still having that predictability, and I think it allows us to pencil in the time we need for ourselves, because that's usually the first thing that goes when we lose our routine. And so even if it's creating a new little routine on vacation, it just allows you and gives you the opportunity to pencil in that time, that this is the time for my walk, or this is the time to sit and watch the sunrise with my coffee, or whatever you need to do in those moments. It really gives you the permission to do it.
Yes.
So awesome.
To the joy of routines.
To the joy of routines. All right, everyone. Well, so good to see you guys, and we'll catch up soon.
Yes. Thank you so much for spending your time with us here today. If you liked what you heard and you got some tips on how to live better right now and for the long haul, please help us reach more midlife women. Please share and rate and like this show. And we can't wait to continue the dialogue with you on our next episode. Until then, thank you. It's time.